still going to see mostly Brian?
Yeah, we're going to see mostly Brian. I mean, he did not have a good day punting it on Saturday, but he's been too consistent through camp. He had a bad day, but I have all the confidence in the world that he's going to come out and punt the ball much better this Saturday.
Both teams coming off tough losses. Is it present a different challenge when you're facing a team coming off a last-second loss like that?
Yeah, I got to get us ready. I'm not in the Tulsa locker room. I have no control over that. I told our players that this season is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And we did some good things that if we build on it, we'll win those 3-point games. And and it was similar to a year ago. I mean, we had some tough losses early, and then later in the year, as our guys got experience, we had some great wins in the last play of the game. So it's hard losing those ones late. Just like at the end of last year in the bowl game, but then you go back and you look at the Kent game and the Buffalo game and a bunch of other games that we made those plays in the fourth quarter. And I think Matt Shields will benefit from being in that situation. Our defense will benefit from being in that situation. And you hope there's some lessons learned that we're in the exact same spot again. We find a way to win it.
Does the team come out hungrier per se? Coming off a tough loss.
I think every team is different. Every team has its own chemistry. It has its own leadership. And those are things that certainly as a coach, we have a 24-hour rule. And I've said this before, that we're going to celebrate a win for 24 hours and we're going to mourn a loss. And then we need to look forward. And now, coaches say that. Does the locker room really buy into that? And that's the difference between teams that can overcome adversity and not. And I don't know that yet. I don't know enough about our team. I believe we have good leaders. I believe we have enough guys on the team that are smart enough about football that saw enough good things on Saturday that realize that we can have a good football team this year. But we play a very, very good team this week. So certainly the way we played on Saturday probably could have beat some teams. Not Troy, and probably not a team like Tulsa.
You mentioned Brian in punting, but he did miss a field goal and had a kickoff go out of bounds. Were you generally pleased with that part of the kicking game? Or?
I wasn't pleased with how we kicked it. I was very pleased with our special teams overall, except for how we kicked the ball. Our kickoff return, to me, getting Tyrone Proney back really helped. Last year we were terrible in kickoff return. I think we were 11th in the MAC and one of the worst teams in the country, and that looked good. We devoted a lot of time to it in the offseason, and I think there was some payoff with it. We spent a lot more time on punt return. Obviously, Eugene Cooper's punt return, if we don't have that play, we're probably not in the game at the end. So I thought in terms of how we protected on punt protection, how we protected on PAT field goal, how we covered kicks except for one, how our return game looked was an improvement. We did not kick the ball well in the punt game or the kickoff game. So, and again, there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to do that better. I mean, again, I've had kickers that are unsteady and they show up in a game and they're unsteady. Brian's been very consistent all camp. He has a strong leg, and that's not going to last long. I'd be shocked.
Anything else?
I do have one kind of off the wall. You're playing on 9/11 on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts, emotions, feelings as you hit that day?
Well, 9/11 is very personal for me for a lot of reasons. In 9/11, 2001, I was the head coach at Fordham, which is in New York City. First of all, we were getting ready to play Columbia that week when it happened, which is also in New York City. And when it first happened, we had so many players' families. A lot of our players at the time at Fordham thought New York was under attack. And my sister worked in the Second World Trade Center building on the 92nd floor. And so when that second plane hit, there was a 50-50 chance that I lost my sister. It was one of those miracle stories that her train that day was 10 minutes late, and she got the last subway out of Ground Zero, but we couldn't get a hold of her for 4 or 5 hours. So I just went into my office for 3 hours and just kept going speed dial my office phone and my cell phone, trying to get a hold of her. So from when it happened till about noon, I had no idea if my sister had passed. And finally, we got a hold of her, around 12, and we found out she got the last subway out of Ground Zero. But then a player that I coached at Fordham, a guy named Nick Brandemarty, who I was very close with. Nick was just one of those, there's a few kids in the course of your career you coach that just you become very close with. And Nick had earned a starting job as a senior at Fordham the year before, and then he suffered a concussion in practice, and he could never play again. So he became a student coach for us. And he was very sharp, a great student, and he went to work in the city in the World Trade Center. And a couple hours later, you started finding out about all the people you knew that worked in the building. And Nick Brandemarty passed away that day. I think Fordham and Columbia as an institution lost more alumni than any other schools. And it was hard. And every time it's 9/11, I still think of Nick. There's a bunch of Fordham football players that when 9/11 hits, they send emails. And, obviously I think of my sister that day. So, and again, I remember our players. I mean, they were, our kids didn't know what to think. They didn't know if New York was under attack. They were scared to leave their dorms. And then I remember, too, that, President Bush at the time said our lives should be normal. And, Fordham and Columbia were going to make a statement of we were the last school to cancel our game. Because the president asked that life return to normal, and then it became very obvious that would be incredibly insensitive to play that game. So just trying to get the guys to even think about football or practice, because up until late Thursday, we were going to play the game. And from that, they started what's called the Liberty Cup, which is Columbia versus Fordham every year. But again, I think of my sister, I think of Nick, and I think of all the players I coached at Fordham and what they were going through, because many of them had families that worked in the trade center, and they were just all around the cell phones, and you couldn't make a cell phone call. All the things were jammed up, and you just, for 3 or 4 hours, guys didn't know if they had lost loved ones or not.
My apologies for a crass question here. How has that affected how you coach and how you live your life now?
Oh, I mean, I think about it all the time, and I think of, the players are, I think when you get into coaching and you're single and you don't have kids of your own, there's a certain approach, and once you have your own children and you start realizing that every one of these young men is somebody's son, you feel a greater obligation to do more than just coach them in football. And we certainly as a program try to run the program that way, that if it's just about football and it's just about winning games, or really, is it important? Yes. We want to win here. We want to win championships. We want to go to bowl games. We want to beat BCS schools. That's very important. But if we do that at the expense of developing character, having them get a degree, it's really what we've done is useless. And did I feel that way before 9/11? Yes. After 9/11, did I feel even more strong about what we do is extremely important? I think so, because the relationships you build with players like Nick Brandemarty, they don't happen in other sports. I mean, football is so intense, requires so much dedication, and it's a different bond. It really is. And I had that. I mean, I had a depressed football team for really almost the rest of the season, and they played with a heavy heart, but they played for somebody, and it wasn't a slogan. It was real. And so I think when you're in the middle of something like that, it can't help but have an impact on how you live your life and how you coach and do your job. We had a New York City policeman on our staff there too, and his precinct was very involved with it, and the stories he was telling us. So that whole year we wore an NYPD hat instead of a school hat, and we got to know some of those people. So there were just incredible stories that certainly made it feel what we did very insignificant at the time.